Okay.
Okay. So I'm filling in for Leslie, and she was going to do codependency. And I thought that rather than jump right into codependency, it might be a good idea to kind of have some foundation of the terminology of addiction and how that kind of manifests or plays out in life. And my nose is itchy, and I'm just going to itch it. Uh, um, First off, alcoholism, drug addiction is a really complex, complicated affliction. And a lot of people don't think of it as an affliction because the person is consuming the substance. So they say, well, they asked for it and they were looking for it, which in part is true. Um, However, there's documentation about the fact that there's brain chemistry that can make a person more apt to pick up the aspect of not being able to use responsibly, because there is, I mean, a lot of people drink responsibly, but there's that portion of people that drink very irresponsibly and have a lot of trouble. So with that being said, that the idea is that addiction is a physical, as I said, it's a physical problem. If someone is a drug addict or an alcoholic and they stop instantly, they're typically may experience withdrawal. And that's because their body has become accustomed to having a substance in order to just feel normal. And with that whole piece, there's also the aspect that there's a psychological or mental component with addiction that is really problematic, and it can cause family members to feel totally nuts because they think they're dealing with a rational person, but indeed they're really not as rational as maybe they were 10 years before, 20 years before, 5 years before, whatever. So, and as the addict or alcoholic continues to develop their reliance on the substance, they begin to manifest what they call addictive or defense mechanisms in order to support their use of the substance. And typically, it's really not a conscious choice of, pretty much it's not a conscious choice of their use of these defense mechanisms. Like it, nothing infuriates me more than to be lied to. And there used to be a saying, you know, how can you tell if an addict or alcoholic is lying? And the joke was that their lips are moving. And it part of that is because I grew up in an alcoholic home. And my father was a binge alcoholic, which is a really interesting aspect of addiction anyway, because he would go months, years sometimes without drinking. And then once he picked up a drink, he was off to the races, sometimes for a night, sometimes for a weekend, sometimes for a week, uh, sometimes longer. So there was a real instability that existed within that whole binge alcoholic experience. So, and he often would say, you know, if your mother loved me, I wouldn't drink. And that is one of the typical defense mechanisms, not necessarily that message, but that using that as an excuse, a rationale, a reason for why I drink or drug, you know, nobody loves me. And I remember when I was a kid, the saying, you know, uh, nobody loves me, everybody hates me, going down the garden eating worms, you know. And so even as a kid, I knew it was kind of like, huh? But of course, when you're a kid and you have an adult that's saying that, that's in control, and you don't question it. But I knew in deep inside that it was kind of like not accurate. And I also know today that he really did believe it. He really believed that that's one of the reasons he drank. And so there's a whole list of defense mechanisms within an addictive personality. And the first one, of course, is denial. And that would be that I don't have a problem. I don't drink that much. I don't drink that often. I only smoke pot. I only do a line of cocaine, on the weekends, or whatever the whole thing is. And within the denial, there's probably going to be some minimization. When I worked in the addiction field, you would ask someone, how much do you drink when you were doing the evaluation? And they would say a couple. And I would say a couple pints, a couple quarts, a couple six packs, because, and they did not like that I was making them be specific, but it was really, it's necessary. And another way of doing that was to ask them, how much are you spending on your choice of medication, because in a lot of ways, this use is a way that they're trying to medicate their reality. And for whatever reasons, and there's probably a whole list longer than, than the oceans, really. So the denial, I don't have a problem. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not an addict. Oh, this is a great one. I can't be an alcoholic because I work. I have a job. I don't miss work. I show up every day. So some of those, there within all of these defense mechanisms, there's kind of like this merging of different ones that kind of like mutate together to really support their excuses or their denial, because it really is. Again, they really, really believe these things, and there is probably a granule of truth in there somewhere in their experience, and that's how they hang on to believing that they're telling the truth. So that the next one on here is lying. So it's really that they're distorting the truth. I used to like to call it misrepresentation. I came up with that, but that is one of the things that they do. That a person that has a problem, I hate to say they, because I mean this can happen with any problem. I mean this can happen with mental health, just that the statements are going to be geared a little differently, but it's just a really complex thing. So manipulation is next. One of the things with manipulation, I believe, is pointing the finger. Famous husband says to the wife, well, if you'd keep the kids quiet, I wouldn't have to use. Or if you kept the house better, I wouldn't have to use. Or if your mother would stay out of our business, or the wife, might say, if you made more money, I wouldn't have to use cocaine or whatever. So that's some of the manipulation, and within that is also the lying and the distorting and all of the other aspects of these things. So another thing that does happen is that a lot of alcoholics or addicts can use other dependency problems kind of coupled with their use, maybe sex addiction or drug addiction and alcohol addiction or whatever. So, and then there's the accusing, which I kind of talked about, the pointing the finger. And with accusing, it's like, well, what about you? You overeat, or what about the fact that you spend too much money? So and that's kind of the accusing, and that's to take the focus off the alcoholic, and it's totally automatic. It's just an automatic reflex that they've developed in order to not have to face the reality that their use is a problem. So then there's the threatening that might come. You better knock it off. I don't have to stay here. I don't have to live here. You know, you'll never find another man, woman like me that'll put up with you, or all kinds of like really hurtful and twisted things can come out, you know. Physical or emotional abuse can also be within that threatening. Judging. If you did this is going back to the thing I said about if you kept a better house, or if you made more money, if you know, showed up when you said you were going to, whatever. That's the whole, that judging is in on that. And projecting. This is like one of the most fascinating things to me about having a problem with projection. It is the person with the problem somehow has something that they're not good with. Maybe, let me see if there's might be a hint on here. Oh, they might accuse their spouse of being unfaithful all the time, when in reality, it's them that is unfaithful. And they're projecting this unfaithfulness onto someone else so that they don't have to look at their behavior that probably is linked somewhat with their loss of control with the substance. And it's also a great, you know, what's that saying? The best offense is a good defense, or the best defense is a good offense. I never did quite get that because I was never a football person, but so that can be the projection too. And with that projecting, they can do it with friends too. They can say, oh, you know, I come out every night because I think my wife is nuts, you know, or insane, and she's mean to me or whatever, when in reality, their behavior is totally not right-sized and not appropriate, but they're gonna say that it's her. And so that's one of them. Blaming, I kind of talked about. Oh, humor is a great one. That's where the person with a problem can make light of the problem and kind of make it into a joke. Yeah, I'm a drunk. So what? I suppose you think I'm going to steal the kids' lunch money because I'm a drunk, you know? And it's a way, again, to remove some of the pain that really they're in a lot of pain internally. They're just really not able to identify it, because if they identified it, then they would have to reconcile that there's accountability for what they're experiencing inside. So intellectualizing, that's using all kinds of intellectual stuff to excuse their behaviors and the way, well, you know, if you had my family, you drink too, or if you'd been abused like I was, you drink. And there can't be I wouldn't be so irresponsible at work if my boss trusted me. That would be a really good one. So intellectualizing is kind of like a way to use their problem as a support for this other, to use their substance problem as a support for their problem that's out of control and is really the problem. So rationalizing, we kind of talked about that. I don't drink, use every day. I don't have a problem. I don't, I have sexual needs that aren't being fulfilled, so of course I'm going to cheat. I have pain and I need my medicine. That's a really big one. So that's some of the rationalization. Silence. Sometimes the person can just be really quiet and withdrawn, because if they stay quiet and withdrawn, no matter what, they're just not going to respond to anything that's going to try to point out that perhaps their substance use is not appropriate, and maybe it's problematic use, not the general use. Minimizing, oh yeah, well, I drink a little now and then, you know. I smoke pot on the weekend, so what, you know? Well, pot's legal now. And there, I mean, truly, I do know that there are people that are addicted to pot. I'm not saying that everyone that smokes pot is addicted any more than anyone that drinks alcohol is an alcoholic. So, oh yeah, oh, here we have one. I've not heard this one. Cockiness. I got it made. Nobody challenges what I do. I can do whatever I want, you know. I can stop. I'm just not going to. That's a really good one. Justifying. We kind of talked about that. If you had my wife, if you had my kids, if you had my husband, if you had my pain, if you had my life. Explaining, telling a long, convoluted story that's not even really accurate about why or how and why things are the way they are, but with no real remorse, just really to elicit sympathy and sorrow, and to kind of get their use co-signed by someone. That's a big one. Analyzing, the person will just come up with an excuse. Well, I was so depressed and I just had to do something about it. My parents were alcoholics, so it's really, I don't act like they did, so I can't be alcoholic. My sexual needs aren't being met, and I get down when I'm not getting the sexual favors that I need, and so I find some way to fill those. Defiance, you can't make me stop. Withdrawing, shouting. This is a really big one in relationships, especially marriages. If a partner, or even with kids, if you try to call them on their loss of control with their use, they may start shouting back, you know, to try to block whatever is going to come at them, and it's to intimidate and to shut you up. And so that's kind of the defense mechanisms. And I don't know if anyone here has had the experience of being around someone that has a problem with substances, but it can really erode a person's core and their rootedness and their sense of what's real. Because of all of those defense mechanisms, the codependent can really begin to think that that they are the problem. And that's totally not true. That's the thing that I really need to mention with codependency and being involved with anyone that has a problem, and loving that person, is that you didn't cause it, you can't control it, and you can't cure it. And that's really, really important to know, because oftentimes the codependent will spend a lot of time and energy trying to figure it out, trying to fix it, trying to control it, thinking that if I just keep the house cleaner, if I just keep the kids quiet, or if I just make more money, you know, she'll be happy, he'll be happy, whatever. And a lot of times the codependent can really believe that the person drinks because they're not happy. Well, I think at that, or uses because they're not happy, but at that point, their use is just to balance and feel normal. There's not really, there a long ago was the happy, the euphoria that came, and that left really, for most people, very rapidly. It doesn't last all that long, depending on the pace and the substance and the frequency. But it's really not the ticket to feeling happy. It really is the ticket to trying to be normal. And so there are some definitions for what codependency is, and how do I know if I'm codependent? How do I overcome codependency? And so right now I'm going to stop and see if people have questions, and then we can always go on to some of the codependency, because I think at some point Leslie's going to address that a little more. And that, oh shit, I forgot. I was going to say that there are some really good, I went online and there's a healthline.com for how to stop being codependent in relationships. I found a joeborders.com, which looked like it was a good thing. And I have found amazing support from Tane Dayton, has a lot of recovery books that have just been really, really phenomenal. One of the first one I got was The Soul's Companion. It's a daily read book, and Tane Dayton, and she's a psychodramatist and a psychologist, but she's also in recovery, a ACOA, and in recovery. And a really phenomenal person that's worked on herself, her marriage, and her family. So with that, now I'll see if there's any questions. Susan?
Hi. Yeah, well, I have a question about not substance addiction, but addiction to activities like gambling or sex or gaming. And also, I'm assuming that codependency can exist without addiction, as well as addiction can exist without codependency. Is that correct to your thinking?
I've never really thought about that. I think they're kind of like married, not literally married, but
yeah, no.
The codependency can be without active like use of substances, but codependency is when you're really focused on another being as opposed to focused on yourself. So you're kind of more worried about what the kid is doing, or the husband, or the wife, or the parent, whatever.
I had an online gaming addiction to a Facebook game called Farmtown. And as far as I can determine, I did not have, I don't think I was codependent, but I was very addicted to this game.
Right. Well, the codependency would be someone that would be trying to control your involvement with the game. That would be the codependent
I
aspect.
see.
So,
Yeah,
yeah. Okay.
really, that really wasn't happening. So.
Right. And yeah, the whole gambling and gaming it's a psychological addiction, and there's it's really good for you if you broke it.
I did. It took
Yeah.
2
It
years.
was,
I was into
yeah,
it
it
2
was
years.
really hard, I'm sure. It was not an
There's,
easy feat.
and I did not find out about this until after I was already stopped, but there's something called Olga, Online Gamers Anonymous.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I actually went on there a few times to give my experiences as someone who's gotten over that. But there's people that have been playing like World of Warcraft or Second Life, 14 years, and just
Right.
it's like it just runs their lives.
Right. There's also the aspect of some people get addicted to pornography.
Right.
And
Yes.
there's a huge thing with leading someone into becoming addicted. The sites, they'll be free and they'll get the person to a certain point, and then all of a sudden you have to put in credit card information, and
oh yeah,
even the porn site will disguise the credit card bill so that the if they're in a relationship, their partner doesn't know. So
right.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's addiction is big money in whatever way.
I found out that one of the medications I take has that as a side effect, the tendency towards being addicted to certain activities. Mirapex, it works on the dopamine pathway,
right.
Which is something that also is with Parkinson's. But
right.
All of the doctors and therapists that I had been seeing and talking to them about this, not one of them said anything to me about it. My friend Wendy Henry, who is an acupuncturist, is the one that pointed out that Mirapex does that.
Right. There are a lot of medications that have some of that going on. Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome. Thank you.
It's interesting, Bonnie. I don't really have a question, but it had me thinking about some of the things that I did when I was younger. I was in a relationship with someone who was addicted to alcohol and drugs when I was in my 20s. And just being in my 20s, I was kind of stupid. And I can remember not knowing what an alcoholic was like. How did you know if someone was an alcoholic? Because when you're in your 20s, some people, we partied a lot,
Yeah.
And at some point in my life, I realized that some of the people around me weren't partying just to have fun, which I thought that's what I was doing, but that they were covering pain. Because when you grow up in a certain neighborhood, you kind of just assume that everyone's home is the same as yours. And maybe they are. Maybe you've not encountered people that had a very different kind of childhood. And once I moved away from where I grew up and was in the larger world and met people from all over, my eyes were kind of wide open to, oh, that can happen or whatever. And that the drug and alcohol abuse can be part of that. And when I was in this relationship, probably in the beginning, once I kind of realized, I don't know though exactly when I realized that this person was an alcoholic, but they certainly did things that bothered me. And I think back on some of the things I tried to do to help them, like flush their drugs down the toilet. Well, that doesn't do any good. Call their work and tell them they're sick.
Right.
I did things like that, but I was, like I said, I was very young, and it didn't take me very long to say, okay, I don't want to be part of this anymore. Oh, lending the money.
Oh yeah.
And then I remember at one point after we had broken up and we still had a lot of the same friends, and I get a phone call in the middle of the night from another friend who said, oh my God, this person's, maybe they were in jail or something, like we needed to bail the person out or something. And I can remember still being young, but saying, no, I'm done. They can stay in jail tonight,
right.
I'm not. Not doing that anymore.
No sympathy for self-inflicted wounds.
Yeah, so you know, I don't really know how long it took me to figure those things out, but I'm kind of proud that I moved away from that when I was young and never engaged with that kind of behavior with people again after that, until I did it for a job.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
what does that mean? I don't know what you mean.
I worked at the same place that Bonnie did at a
Mhm.
alcohol and drug rehab program.
Okay.
We didn't work at the same time there, but we met each other later. But
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, that's funny.
oh yeah, I worked there too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I knew by then I knew all the games, you know.
Right. Yeah. And
Mhm.
it just becomes like, oh yeah.
Yeah, right. You're telling me the truth.
How wonderful that you really had a quick realization. For I mean, for many people it takes years, so wow, kudos to you for getting
Well, it was
the
a
lights
few-
coming on.
It took a few years for sure. I mean, you know,
Mhm.
but
Well, a few compared, I mean, like some, I've had clients where their wife comes in, they've been married 25 years or something, and I'll say, did you smell alcohol on your husband today? And she, oh no. And I was like, really? They're just, they don't even, there's just no
it's funny,
knowing.
and if you ever wonder about a pamphlet ever helping anyone, it
Mm.
can. I was
Yeah,
working for the Red Cross, and I was at a health fair type thing.
Mhm.
You know, sometimes when you're at these things, I know Anna knows, you walk around and you look at the other tables and you pick up pamphlets. And I remember AA was there and they had a pamphlet, you know, with 10 things or something. And if you're 3 of those things, you're probably an alcoholic. And I remember reading those and going, I think my friend's an alcoholic, you know, reading this little pamphlet.
Yep.
You know, no internet back then, you know.
Right, yeah. Mhm. The good old days.
Yeah, that's kind of how I diagnosed myself as having ADD, because I was going over the information on my son's papers that I had talked to his pediatrician, because one of his teachers thought that, you know, that he had ADD. And so I'm reading this in my doctor's office. I'm like, damn, not only does Matthew have this, I've got this too.
Good old pamphlets.
Yep.
Mhm. Any other comments or thoughts?
I always have comments and thoughts. But I want to let somebody else talk if they want to.
Right. One of the interesting things about codependency is, and I think I started to mention it earlier, is that codependency can become a way of relating and interacting with other than alcohol or substances. If you have a serious illness in your family, if you have extreme a loss and you're grieving and you're traumatized by losing a significant person, there's just like so many ways that you can get the characteristics of codependency without having alcohol or drugs. But if you get that at a very early age, you're more apt to then kind of like slip into being codependent within another relationship. And so I just thought that that was kind of important to mention. And I know for me, I already shared that my father was a binge alcoholic, and I wasn't a quick study like Rosanna. I married 2 alcoholics, you know, and yeah. And the first one never did get sober. The second one did, but then started using pot and acting out. And so anyway, it's been, that's when I finally decided my solution is to just be single. because my daughter told me a long time ago, Mom, your picker's broke. If you want
Connie, do you think it's because of your family? I mean, that was the model you had of what a man was, what a husband, what a father was, and maybe that's why you picked people like that. I don't know.
could be, or the fact that I'm a fixer,
Yeah.
and because, yeah, I don't know, but I just know that I'm best off to just be Bonnie and not even try to engage in anything that kind of, if I think that it even seems like a relationship, I get totally a transformation. I become weird. So
Oh. Well, I was this is bringing back some memories, but I'm realizing that during that time period in my 20s when I was in this relationship, I also had some friends that had some problems with alcohol, and I would help them.
right. Yeah.
I actually had a friend who would give me their paycheck, and they would, I guess, pay their rent or whatever, and then they would say, hide this money, and no matter how much I beg you, don't give me the money. Like, I think
Right.
about that now. At the time, I think I thought it was funny. Well, not funny, but I think I felt honored that they
Right.
trusted me with their money. I mean,
And
actually
you were
cash
so
money.
helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. And I look back and I'm like, well, that's a fucked up thing.
My mother used to hide the money because my dad would take it and spend it. And somehow my brother or I knew where the money was, and Dad got it out of us. And he took the rent money and drank it up. It was a horrible, traumatic thing. Everything within that whole system could just be traumatic because of his powerlessness over, once he picked up, it was all holes barred. Yeah. Man. But there's some the other laundry list, and this is kind of about codependency, but kind of in a different way. Because some people that grow up in a home where there's substance use or where there's instability for whatever reason, there's this to cover our fear of people and our dread of isolation, we tragically become the very authority figures who frighten others and cause them to withdraw. If you know somebody that's a control freak, that might be where it's coming from. And to avoid becoming enmeshed and entangled with other people and losing ourselves in the process, we become rigidly self-sufficient. We disdain the approval of others. When you were talking, Rosanna, it also made me think about the fact that I was in the addiction field for 30 some years, and it met that need for me to think I was helping. And I do know that I did help because I didn't go into codependency, but it also filled a need for a sense of intimacy because I got to, get into other people's worlds kind of, and know what was going on. And so it really was probably not the best career for me to have, but it paid the bills and it was an honorable way, I guess, to support myself, but not exactly the healthiest. So.
But don't you think that there are some people that are in treatment who appreciate interacting with people who have been where they have been?
Yeah.
Where I couldn't really offer that to them.
Mm-hmm. There's also the piece, though, that they can use that to their advantage. Well, you don't understand me because you aren't blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And that's bullshit too. So I did try to not tell someone until I really knew their true conviction for change. But this other laundry list is pretty interesting. And I think, oh, yeah, I already mentioned the sites, but it sounds like nobody here today is really in need of any of those things. But if anyone really wants to check out the Soul's Companion book, that is really good. And there's also a recovery from trauma workbook that Tane Dalton has put out. And I bet that's really amazing because everything she does is pretty amazing. Anna, you've been so quiet today.
Yeah, I'm a little bit tired, but what was the name of the author that you mentioned?
Tane, T-I-A-N, Dalton, D-A-L-T-O-N.
Okay.
And the Soul's Companion is just a daily reader book. And actually I have it, and I couldn't find it today, but it's around here somewhere. And then some other, this is really a good book for anyone. Hopefully it doesn't show backwards for you guys, but for anyone that possibly did grow up in a family that had, I like to call it gaps, family gaps. This is called Growing Up Again. And it's really good for working with children or working with yourself to know how things got upside down the way they did. Because there's certain things, certain needs may have not been met that you didn't even realize were not met, that were integral part of a balance internally. I used it a lot with in my work. Did you have any questions, Harry?
Had to unmute myself. No, I didn't. Actually, that was very well presented. It was really very well planned and very well explained. And I know what codependency is with respect to addiction and things like that. And you did a great presentation.
Well, thank you, Harry.
It makes sense. It's good. And I have no questions.
All right, thanks. I think probably the biggest thing that's the most difficult is to realize that it is a disease, and that that it pushes so many emotional buttons that it's really, really challenging if you're in an intimate, enmeshed relationship to keep the focus on the fact that so much of it is just not personal. It's about the addiction, huh?
I said, which is basically true about other people's behavior in general.
Right. Yes, exactly.
It's not about us. It's they've got something going on, and
right.
Very true.
Yes, Susan.
I just wanted to mention a few things, some of them serious and some of them funny. When you were talking about, when you're growing up in a family that it's your neighbors and your friends are all kind of that same milieu, it's like they say, fish don't see water until you bring somebody out of that. For me, it was babysitting. I used to babysit for a lot of families, and I found out, these people don't do what my family does. So that was good. Another thing that is often quoted around friends of mine, and I have a lot of friends who are into like the BDSM community and poly and stuff, and they say, it's not a problem unless it's a problem. Like I said, there's plenty of people who can drink or take occasional drugs and be responsible about it.
Right.
But if you have an addictive personality, it's better not to even start, if it's in your family.
Right.
And I just wanted to just these. I had a friend who I volunteered with at my son's school, and she was.
I unmuted myself. Have a good day.
Okay.
Bye, Harry.
Bye, Harry.
No, what? I was muted.
Oh. You're,
I videoed myself out.
Yeah, your video is off.
okay, there you
Now
go.
you're muted. Now you're muted, Harry. Your camera's on and you're muted.
And now I unmuted myself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's what I was supposed to do. Push that. I did it a few times earlier and I did it
Live and
right.
learn.
This time
Right.
I didn't look at what I was touching. I touched the video instead of the microphone.
Right.
Sorry about that.
That's
okay.
So, yeah, and this is somebody that I volunteered with at my son's school, and there were these, quote unquote book titles. They were all, very silly. One of them was "Daddy Drinks Because You Cry,"
Yeah.
and I used to be addicted to the hokey pokey, but then I turned myself around.
Right.
And have you heard the? I'm not addicted to brake fluid. I can stop anytime I want.
Hey, Susan, when I worked in the addiction field, I had that hokey pokey quote in a frame in my office.
Oh, cool. We've got it on the refrigerator here.
One of the things that I forgot to mention, so I'm kind of glad some of this came up, is that there's some unspoken rules within an addictive family system. And it's don't talk, don't trust, and don't feel. As a child, you learn that, you don't talk about what's really going on at home outside of the house. In the 5th grade, I talked about it, and it was not pretty. The teacher got mad at me for bringing it up. I said something about Dad came home drunk, and she pointed at me, and we don't talk about that in here. This is after another student talked about their sibling dying.
Wow.
Well, hopefully that's not the case anymore, because they're always telling kids, go to a trusted adult, go to your teacher, whatever.
Although a parent probably tells the kids don't talk because they'll take you away, because all of these people are mandated reporters too.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course the don't trust is that the parent may say they're going to do this or that, but you can't really trust that it's really going to happen. At the time they say it, they probably mean it, but it's not going to happen. And then the don't feel is, what the hell are you crying about? Or or you just learn to cut off your feelings because it's just easier.
Have you dealt at all with ask versus guess families?
Ask
Families,
versus
yeah.
yes.
Ask versus guess. And guessing is like that, there are unspoken rules and you have to just kind of walk around on eggshells and figure it out for yourself.
Right.
As opposed to an open family where you can say, hey, what's going on?
Right. And that's very true. And I would ask, but I always got nothing. That was the answer. Nothing. So it was the kind of like saying shut up, but instead it was just nothing. And I do realize that everybody in life is doing the best they can, and it's not about blaming or shaming. It's just about helping people understand, that that this is a disease and that it's not a fault of anyone. It just is a reality, but it can change. That's the thing that Rosanna and I can both attest to, that there are some changes that can happen.
I had very low expectations for my clients.
Right.
Sometimes they would surprise me. I didn't want to be disappointed too much or go in there as this gun-ho, idiot or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a wise decision.
Yeah.
Have appropriate expectations.
Yeah.
I had one client that, oh gosh, he drove his appointment drunk. And so I had to take his keys. He called a taxi, went home, got another set of keys, came back and got his truck and drove drunk again. And so he was like this really pain in my ass. And then I sent him to rehab twice, and then he got sober, and he stayed sober. The last time I saw him, he was sober, I don't know, 20 years, a long time.
Wow.
And we talked, and he mentioned his granddaughter. And he talked about, his granddaughter and how much he liked her. And then he goes, I don't know why I'm talking about her. And I was like, well, more will be revealed. Within a week, he died of a heart thing, I think. And I went to the funeral, and I met his granddaughter, and I told her what her grandfather had said. And she started crying. I'm getting goosebumps. She started crying, and she said, I never knew my grandfather loved me. And so it was like so kind of like ironic that I got to let her give this message to her from and she didn't know it. So it was like really, I was like, oh my gosh. And
That's
that
a
was
blessing.
long after I was out of the field of addiction and everything.
That's a blessing that you got to say that to her.
I know. And his wife was still alive, and she was like, I can't believe it. She was all happy. So
Yeah.
so yeah, it was a gift.
Well, thanks again.
Silver linings.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Yes.
Great.
So let's get
Great.
the heck out of here.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It was really great.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
I've got
Thank
to
you,
go
Bonnie.
running now.
Thank you.
Okay, run
Happy
away.
both.
You really did a good job.
Run,
with it.
Harry, run.
Yeah, no, it's part of my training. I have a scheduled time with my club, but you really did a good job with it, Bonnie.
Thank
it was
you,
really
Harry.
good. I meant what I said, and great. It was good.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll see you.
Anna. Yep. Bye,
Take care.
Rosanna. Bye,
Bonnie, are you
Susan.
gonna put
Bye.
some
Bye,
of those
Bonnie. Bye,
links
Rosanna.
in
Bye,
the,
Anna. Bye, Harry.
Am I gonna do what, Anna?
put some of the links in the group?
You know,